Hi, welcome back to Unboundless. Today we're going to be attempting to do two things. I'm going to be sewing a canary dress, and we're going to have a very brief introduction into multiple chemical sensitivity. I chose a dress pattern that looked like it would be adaptable through weight loss, as well as be easily tweaked into future dresses. Under bust lines are challenging for my body. They never fall low enough to be under my bust. Knowing this would be an issue going in, I added 5 inches to the bottom of my front bodice piece and then made a mock-up. This gave me the right length in the middle, but there was too much fabric in the rest of the bust. I took a piece of chalk and drew a line on the mock-up where the under bust line should be, then unpicked the mock-up and adjusted the pattern. The fabric I'm using for this dress is cambric cotton with a canary print. I chose it purely for the canary. In the MCS community, we see ourselves as the canaries in the coal mine. We are the ones who are suffering from a dangerous world and try to warn others. You may have noticed I've chosen a canary as my symbol for this channel. I chose to make mine in flight because I wish to focus on my efforts to live a full and meaningful life within the confines of my bubble. My initial goal for this video was to introduce multiple chemical sensitivity. I wanted to remove my personal story, saving that for a future video, and just compile research. Unfortunately, I was reminded very quickly why I hate researching MCS. The available research boils down to these people say that they are sick, and we can see that they're sick, but we can't prove that they're sick, and we don't know how to study this. Much of the available research implies or says outright that they believe MCS is a psychiatric disorder. While mental illness is a real thing and should be explored and not stigmatized, it feels dangerous to label an illness that doctors cannot understand as being purely psychological just because they can't understand it. MCS sufferers are predominantly female, so there may be an element of gender bias at play. Women's pain is more likely to be dismissed by medical professionals. They are more likely to be misdiagnosed, especially when chronic pain is misinterpreted as a result of a psychological illness. I do not believe that my MCS has been caused by a mental condition. I do believe that my MCS has contributed to poor mental health. When I first started experiencing MCS symptoms, I was happy and healthy. I was in peak physical form. I was exercising regularly. I was eating mostly healthy foods. I was working in a job that was fun and challenging and fulfilling. And I had been recently married to my best friend and the most wonderful supportive partner. He's a friggin' saint. And then the job that I loved started to make me sick. In my spare time, I loved to go thrift shopping, and I loved to paint and like to make things, and suddenly all these things that were a huge part of who I was making me sick. MCS was taking away things that I loved and taking my sense of self. Suddenly my body began to feel constantly under attack. Something was making me sick. Something was causing headaches, brain fog, breathing difficulties, exhaustion, and fits of coughing so intense they ended in vomiting and/or incontinence. My coworkers' perfumes, lotions, hair products, laundry products, even their coffee was causing a physical reaction in my body. This understandably caused mood changes and irritability. My body was in a constant state of fight or flight. When my coworkers knew that their products were making me sick and they did nothing to change them, it felt personal. And I was working in a school that at one point had a fragrance-free policy. When I started working there, they had a fragrance-free policy, but they did little or nothing to enforce this. Not only was my body betraying me, but my employers and many of my coworkers were betraying me as well. I couldn't keep working. With MCS, once you have a triggering response to something, it lowers your body's tolerances to everything else. Most days I can tolerate the smell of food cooking, but if I'm already triggered, then the smell of cooking food becomes intolerable. Being constantly triggered was making my MCS symptoms become worse and worse until I was constantly sick at work and then unable to do anything once I got home except for crawl into bed. I entered isolation. Once my body was no longer under constant attack, then my tolerances for low-level exposures began to improve. I started to have good days, and then most of my days were good days. I was much less irritable. I do continue to experience bouts of depression, especially in these days of plague, but that seems to be a natural side effect of isolation. At this point, I can be happy, I can be healthy when I'm isolated. I can have mostly good days when I'm isolated. Some of the research I read encouraged MCS sufferers to keep working and avoid isolation. I wish I had isolated earlier. Perhaps if I had been able to leave my job when I first began to experience symptoms, I would be able to recover enough to live a relatively normal life. Dismissing MCS by saying it's a purely psychological illness removes the world's obligation to make accommodations for sufferers of MCS. If everyone stopped using perfumes and stopped using fragrance laundry products and hygiene products, the world would open up massively for me. I could spend time in my garden instead of being chased away by the neighbors doing their laundry. I could attend school events and support my daughter as she grows through school and not be the weird mom in the mask. The pattern itself was fairly simple and should have gone together fairly quickly, but I had significant issues. Significant.
I don't know what is going on with my machine. I don't know why it is doing this. It was making incredibly long stitches. And I have rethreaded it, I have redone the bobbin, and it just keeps like giving me a couple of stitches and then nothing. So I don't know how to sew when my machine is finding me this hard.
The fabric was showing stress where the needle was entering, and then my machine began to skip stitches. A lot of them. After much cursing and a little crying, I gave up and hand sewed the front facing. I quickly learned that I cannot hand sew a straight line. And then I figured out my two big issues. My machine does not like interfacing. I typically trim the interfacing down to avoid sewing through it. I had not done so for this facing. Also, my partner mentioned that he had bought me an assortment of needles. I'm used to Singer color-coded needles, but these needles look, well, identical. I hadn't realized that I was using my heaviest duty needle. I swapped the needle, trimmed the interfacing, and the dress flew together after that. One of the few upsides to being homebound is that I get to wear whatever I want to wear. I get to feel comfortable, and I get to choose what fashion is for me. And honestly, the big fashion through line in my life has been Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. She's an icon. Recently, I decided that if I was going to start sewing clothes for myself, that I would love to lean into the frizzle core and make dresses and clothes with meaningful prints that relate to the topic of my videos. The original dress did not have pockets. They made a mistake. I fixed it. This dress has side seams, so it was a very easy addition. I cut the pockets out of scrap, sewed them on the panels of the hips, then sewed up the dress in the pockets at the side seams. Never don't add pockets when pockets can be so easily added. Well, full disclosure, I wish I had made my pockets a little bit bigger. I was trying to conserve the scrap, but now I have pockets that are a smidge smaller than I would like. To finish the dress, I tacked the facing down by hand and also tacked down the front middle panel a smidge. Overall, I'm happy with how the dress came out. I see a lot of things I want to change for the next dress, but I'm also just thrilled to have a dress that has room for my bust and it has pockets. Next time I'm going to be making a Gunny Sacks inspired garden themed dress. Garden Sacks. So subscribe so you don't miss it. I also want to keep making videos about MCS, so let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything that you would like to see. Thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye! Underbust!